This morning, we all take our seats on a swamped boat. Look above you. Churches have for centuries been designed to resemble an overturned ship. That's the bottom of the ship. Are we sinking? The place where you are seated is called the nave. The Latin word is navis, from which we get the word navy. This is no architectural accident that our boat is overturned. Church buildings often look like boats, generation after generation, century after century. This morning, many mornings, Jesus' disciples board inverted ships all over the world, riding out the storms of life together. The boat has always been, for Christianity, a sign of salvation. Remember the ark on which Noah and his family sailed to safety? Luther spoke of baptism as a boat on which we ply life's dangerous waters. When you walk out the doors this morning, again, look up. A ship sails in our ceiling, a replica of a Danish sailing ship like those you will see in churches all over Northern Europe, the churches in which my husband's families and mine come from, lined with ships. Each ship an exact replica of a ship that almost went down in a storm but didn't. And when the sailors who were members of that congregation came home, they built a model of that saving ship and hung it on the ridge of the sanctuary. Today, we also are on a boat beside Jesus' disciples in a craft that is not suited for the waters ahead. We are still in the early chapters of Mark's gospel, chapters in which Jesus has been flexing his miracle muscles and testing his power. Already he has cast out demons, made robust a withered hand, taught a lame man to walk, cured a leper, and cooled a fever. Is there nothing this man cannot do? Well, on that long ago night on the Sea of Galilee, it seemed that Jesus, even Jesus, had reached his limits. Exhausted from a day of proving himself to the crowds, inexplicably, Jesus ordered his disciples at dusk to row to the other side of the sea. It was a fool's errand. Only an idiot or a criminal fleeing the law would launch a small craft on those deep waters in the dark. The Sea of Galilee lies 700 feet below sea level. Around the sea, the hills of Galilee reach nearly 1,400 feet, and on the other side, the Golan Heights rise 2,500. Winds that come over those mountains pour down into that basin and can create a storm in a matter of moments. So you have to ask, was Jesus running away from something? Was he running to something? Mark doesn't mention his motive. But immediately after setting sail in the dark, Jesus fell asleep in the back of the boat. Panicked, the disciples rowed and bailed as fast as they could, but the sea seemed to be winning. In desperation and with some trepidation, they shook Jesus awake, not to say, "Hey, are you okay?" but with an accusation. "You don't care. You don't even care that we're drowning here." I cannot imagine it was a nice way to wake. Without addressing the obvious flaw in their logic, Jesus was, after all, literally in the same boat. Jesus stood, stretched, and shouted, not at them, which is what I would have done, but at the wind and the seas. "Shut up! Shut up!" And they did. If you remember turntables and LPs, remember when you lifted the needle off the record? Immediate silence. That's what it was like. The sea suddenly went still, the wind not even a whisper. Then he turned to his disciples, who were probably face down in the bottom of the boat, wondering if Jesus can bring nature to its knees. What in the world is he going to do to us? Nothing, except sigh. What else do I have to do? What else do I have to do so that you will believe in me? My first parish call was to a congregation in Anchorage, Alaska. And as one of the newest pastors in the synod, my husband and I always got the plum assignments from the bishop. My first summer, I was assigned to serve on the team that planned and hosted the All-Alaska Summer Camp. Lutheran kids from all over the state, you know how big Alaska is, all over the state converged on a wilderness campground for a week to sing, to study, to make stupid crafts for their mothers, and to bond with other Christians in the woods. There is no weather as gorgeous in Alaska in the summer. But even in the summer, the lakes are frigid. Only the truly brave or the truly foolish swim in those lakes. But those kids, they were fearless in boats. The canoes went out right after breakfast and often didn't come in until dusk. One evening during supper, the camp director pulled me aside and whispered, "Count your kids." "What?" I whispered back. "Count your kids. We just spotted an overturned canoe in the middle of the lake, and we don't know who was in it." Quickly huddling the rest of the staff, we decided to make the emergency head count a game, hoping to hide our panic. "Everybody up!" I shouted. "Fastest to find your cabin group wins a prize." Always up for a challenge, campers leapt from their seats, rushed to find their counselors, and waited. As one by one, names were called. Each counselor calling his or her campers by name, dreading the silence that would fall should one of the campers not be there. But when all our campers were declared present and accounted for, I turned to the camp director and I said, "We're all here. What does this mean?" Well, it meant that he was enraged. "Who did this?" he shouted at the kids. "What idiot swamped a canoe in the middle of the lake and swam back? Do you know how many people have been looking for you? Do you know how frightened we were? Do you know what this could have meant?" It didn't take long to identify the three guilty parties, grade school boys who were getting smaller and smaller and smaller in their seats, three boys who always had a heart for mischief, but were not yet old enough to recognize that mischief has consequences. The camp director marched them off to his office for a lecture, and we were left to calm the fear that still filled us. Waters, whether Alaskan or Israeli, easily overwhelm even the most skilled of sailors. And only a fool is not afraid. Only a fool. Or Jesus. Week after week, generation after generation, century after century, Jesus' disciples have boarded the boat that we call church, riding out the storms of life together. It is no accident that this ship sails the world's waters, overturned like a kid's canoe swamped in a lake. Does this architectural design mean that we're already sunk, that we're in over our heads, that we're doomed to drown? No. It means that Jesus is never far away. It means that in the middle of our storms, we cannot know either how the storm will end or what the storm might mean. It means that even if he seems to be sleeping because of inaction, the ability of danger and fear and sorrow to go on, even then, Jesus has power to diminish any wind. So together, we who are disciples set sail into the world's dangerous waters, sheltered in a battered bow. You see, Jesus doesn't stir the storms. He stills them. And then he sets us back to the oars.